Welcome to part 2 of creating a query using Microsoft Access. Part 1 explored, first of all, what is a query and how to create a query. This demonstration is going to go through the following objectives, and that is how to filter data when you have created a query, the difference between filtering data and also reinforcing your understanding of the purpose of a query, how to apply and criteria as well as or criteria to a query, in addition to formatting a data sheet. So let's get started. And as within part 1, I am going to be using the same database to show a continuation of using that data. So in using this database, the first thing we want to discuss is around, excuse me, how to apply and filter data. So within a query, okay, so remember we have created our query, and this is an extension from part 1, and we are currently within our data sheet view. We can filter data. How we would filter data would then be on our Home tab. You see we have an icon here that looks like a flute, and we can click that, and this allows you to filter data. You can filter data by unselecting all of the data, only selecting a few of the fields you want to see. If you click OK, then notice it will filter for that data you want. If any of the fields are filtered, it will then show this icon here that you have now filtered the data. It also shows down below of your data sheet that it has been filtered. It shows it in multiple places, so you'll know this data has been filtered. To take the filter off, you'll just go back, select all, and click OK. Now, anytime you filter data within your data sheet, it only shows at that moment. So what I mean by that is if we go back, and I'm just going to filter it for black, I'm going to click OK, and notice it only brings up the black doctor's last name. If I then go and I close, they say you want to save, I say yes. I go back and I open up that. Notice my filter is off. So your filters are only temporary, meaning they only show up as you're looking at that data at that time. Now, if you want to filter your data permanently, you then would need to modify your query. So this is our doc info query. To modify our query, we need to go back to view and go to design view. Remember, this is where we can modify our query. Now, I talked about sorting and a little bit of filtering in part 1, but in this part, I also want to show you that you have the ability to permanently place any type of filtering of putting things in ascending or descending order right here within your query as well. Because anything you do in your query will be permanent within your data sheet. So if I want my doctor's last name to sort in the ascending order, then I can just include that within my query. If I also wanted to sort it by state, I can also include it. I'm going to go descending, okay? And I'm going to hit run. Remember, anytime you modify your query, you have to hit run. And notice now how my data is now sorted by last name, and it's also grouping the different cities together as well. That is a permanent modification that was done within my query. So now I want to discuss if I want to put in and or statements within my criteria to make it even more specific. So let me go back and show you what it looks like now. And I have all of my doctors and their information. Well, what if I only want a few? And I'm going to pick out, I only want Black and I only want Harris. Okay, I only want those two to show. Well, if I only want those two to show, and remember, if I only show it like this, Black and Harris, it'll show. But once I close it, go back and reopen, all of my data is still there. I just want Black and Harris to show every time I open up this data sheet. So to do that, I'll go back to my design view of my query. And under my doctor's last name, you see a line that says criteria. Criteria gives you the ability to permanently modify and put in a limiting condition into your query. And if you have this within your data set, which it is to be true, then it will modify and only have the query to include that subset of information. So remember, we said we wanted Black, right? And we also wanted Harris. Okay, oops. And we also wanted the last name of Harris. Now, because I am entering more than one provider's name, it becomes an OR criteria, meaning you're going to be looking for Black or Harris within the data and only pulling that back. So remember, once you make a modification, you'll click run and notice what comes back is only Harris and only Black. So if I go and I close that, yes, I want to save it, and I go back into my doc info, my only the two physicians that I wanted to see now has been displayed within my data sheet view. So what did I do? I put in the criteria of Black or Harris. And notice, when we first put it in, I just put it all in each of the individual rows. Access is so smart, it writes that statement for you and puts in the quotes and the or for you in the criteria, and you don't have to change anything. Now, I could add somebody else to it as well. And I think overturn was one of them. Let's see, was that it? Okay, it wasn't, but that's okay, because if I want to view all of them again, I could just go and delete it. Okay, I can delete my criteria at any time, and then all of my data that was originally in these two tables that I selected in my original query then would show. So remember the difference between a filter versus adding criteria to your query. A filter is temporary. It only shows when you're working within that data sheet, versus a criteria is going to be permanent for that query because you modify it within the data sheet view, within the design query design view. Sorry about that. Okay. So within the query design view, you make that modification. It is going to be permanent within that query. Okay. So that's about modifying your query. The other thing that I wanted to discuss is formatting your data sheet. So if we go back, we're going to run this, and now we have a data sheet. Okay. Within your data sheet, you can add bold. Okay. So notice on my home tab under text formatting, I can bold information. I can highlight information if I want within my data sheet view. I can underline. Notice how things are underlined. I could do all of those things within my data sheet view. And if I wanted to preview that, I could then just go to my file, print, always do print preview, and then it will show you what it would look like if you went to print this sheet of data out. When you're on this print preview tab, you have the ability to change the margins. You can change the size if you want it on legal or a different size of paper. You also can change the page orientation to landscape, and that gives you the ability to kind of see all of your data. If it was on multiple pages, you'll then be able to see. If it was on more than one page, you'll be able to see all of that. So you have the ability to print out queries as well as print out your tables as well. Okay. So if we go back to where we are, okay, we go back to home. I think we just need to close. Oh, here it is. Once we click on that tab, we can go close preview. It takes us back. If that's something we don't want, we can just hit close. If it says, do you want to save it? I quickly can say no. And if I open it back up, any of those modifications that I made are now gone away, okay? Because remember, anything you modify, you have to be sure to save it. So this sums up the additional features and skills that you can do in using a query. I hope that this has been helpful in getting you started. And now go ahead and venture out and create more queries within your database.